All right. Welcome, everybody, to Cracking the Rich Code podcast. I'm your host, Pete Beskus, and with us today is another one of our authors. This is Sir James Gray Robinson, Esquire. He is an author in book 13. His chapter is named Luxury Marketing. And I just want to welcome you to the show, James.
Pete, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell your listeners a little bit about how to crack the rich code.
That's amazing. So tell the audience a little bit about who you are, where you come from, what got you here today.
Well, I was a trial lawyer for 30 years in North Carolina until I had a breakdown, nervous breakdown. They didn't call it burnout back then. They call it a nervous breakdown, but people understand what burnout is. And so I went through that in 2004, and I set out on a path to try to understand what happened to me because I was going to therapy. I was, had a counselor, and it just wasn't helping. And what I've discovered along the way is that there's a lot of aspects to stress and trauma that a lot of people don't understand. And until they do understand it and until they do learn how to manage it, the end result's going to be burnout because that's just the way our brain is programmed. That's just the way our body protects us from stress and overwork. And so, it's kind of like a circuit breaker. And until you do something affirmative to change the way that you think, change the way that you behave, your circuit breaker is going to pop, and you're going to be like me in bed in a fetal position, wondering what the heck to do. So I've trained with a lot of spiritual leaders. I've trained with a lot of psychotherapists. I've done an awful lot of research into neurobiology because I know from my own personal experience that the mind and the brain creates our reality. And so the more you know about the way the mind works, and which is separate from the brain. The brain is the vessel, the organ that holds the mind. Um, so there are physical things that go on, there are emotional things that go on, and there are mental things that go on, all of which can either lead you to a very joyful, amazing life, or it can make your life pure hell. And so I teach people how to have a happy, successful, stress-free life. And my motto is turn your stress into success. And if you understand what the most recent research in neurobiology is telling us, it's not that difficult. It's just you have to do it. And so it's not so much anybody's doing anything wrong. It's the fact is that the way society trains us to behave is almost guaranteed to end up in burnout.
Yeah,
Uh,
I experienced it. That you're hitting a lot of nerves with me because that's a very similar story. 20 years of being in industry and the energy industry, and then I also experienced burnout. And that's what It's funny how you say it because it's a crescendo. It leads up, and it's all the blocks that lead up to there. One thing that always surprised me is that you know we don't hear enough of those positive messages and the like how do we avoid getting to there in the first place. So from your work right now, what message do you send out there? How do you get people to kind of ring that alarm bell?
well, there are a number of things you can do physically as far as intervention wise. There are things that you can do that will trigger your brain, that will stop the stress. We have what's everybody, most people know we have an autonomic nervous system, which regulates our organs and our breathing, our heart rate, our digestion without us having to think about it. If we had to remember to digest, you can understand how complicated life would be if we had to stop and think, okay, let's push that stuff further down the road. But the problem is that most we really didn't understand the mind and the body connection as far as how that affects our behavior and how it affects our mood. So what they've discovered is that there's some exercises you can do. There are techniques that you can use during the day that will change the way your autonomic nervous system works. There are actually, depending on how you look at it, there are either two or three parts to the autonomic nervous system. The first is called the sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight response. If you feel threatened or you are stressed out, your body pumps cortisol and adrenaline into your system in order to make you stronger and faster and to be able to run away or to fight whatever the threat is. The problem with it is that the body can't sustain that for very long, and I'm just talking about minutes.
Hmm.
If you're in your fight or flight for more than an hour, then your body starts to deteriorate. It affects your mental state. It affects your immune system. All kinds of bad things happen to your body when you're flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. Um, you gain weight. You can't sleep. You get anxious. All these things that people experience when they're overstressed is all because of the fact that they are in that fight or flight response. And I call that the warrior. When we are triggered in the warrior mode, then we can't even think straight. We're thinking with the primitive part of our brain because the autonomic nervous system shuts down everything that's not necessary for fight. And that includes digestion. It includes the frontal lobe. All energy is channeled to our muscles and to our primitive brain. So if you're in that stage or in that space for long periods of time, then you are going to basically become exhausted. You're going to be depressed. You're going to be stressed out to the point where your body will eventually just turn off. Because the brain is one of the most amazing organs of evolution ever came. A Homo sapien brain is one of the most amazing organs, and its primary function is not to make art, it's not to sing songs, it's not to create a beauty, it's to stay alive. And it's done a pretty good job for, depending on what evolutionary tale you believe, for hundreds of thousands of years. The problem with it is that when it's in that warrior mode, it overrides everything else. So your relationships suffer, your cognitive abilities suffer, your imagination turns off, your intuition turns off. And so you really are not in the best mode for problem solving. You can see all the problems, it looks for the problems, but it can't solve any problems. So the way that you get out of that mode, the way you turn that off, they call it deregulation, is to get into your parasympathetic nervous system, which is another part of the autonomic nervous system. And I call that the guru mode. And that's the rest and digest, where all of the pleasure molecules, all of the wonderful hormones that our brains produce when it's in the parasympathetic mode are like uh, melatonin, serotonin, oxytocin, which is actually produced in the gut, but stick with me here. The dopamine, all of these pleasure molecules are produced when we're in the parasympathetic mode, and we can connect with other people. We can have relationships. We can uh, be creative. We can create art. Civilization was created when our brains developed the parasympathetic nervous system, and we were able to sit down and negotiate and compromise and figure out the solution to problems. Uh, and the more we can stay in that mode, the more we can succeed, the more we can be successful, the more fun we can have, the more joy we'll have in our life. And the thing is that our body and our brain is designed to be in the parasympathetic mode 90% of the time. You don't want to be in the sympathetic or the warrior mode for longer than a couple of minutes a day. So the what we're trying to do is to do whatever physical exercises, physical movements, or visualization techniques, meditation, that sort of thing, are able to turn your sympathetic warrior off and turn on your parasympathetic guru. And that's really, getting back to cracking the rich code. I didn't write my chapter about this stuff. I wrote it about marketing. But the secret to becoming successful is being in the right uh, physical state in order to be successful. And you can't be successful if you're in the guru or the warrior mode all the time.
Yeah, it's
Because
interesting that you mentioned that because I have had a similar journey and similar realizations and epiphanies after the fact. I think our culture, especially people who are younger, right? You have that energy, and I know I fed off of that stress and that anxiety, and it was because that's easy to tap into, right? That energy that we create through the fight or flight, it is powerful. The adrenaline helps you go. And I think that our society loves to tap that button as, an instant motivator, right? That's why we use anger. That's why, we have deadlines, like deadlines, perceived emergency to get people to move
yeah,
faster and to execute, right? Um,
so that's what I do is I teach people how to get out of their warrior mode and get into their uh, guru mode. And it's, these aren't anything. I've written about this extensively. I've written books about it. So it's no secret. One of the things you can actually do, and this is how simple it is, but people forget. They're not trained to do this. They don't understand how it works. And I'll give you the simplest, just smile.
mhm.
Because when you smile, you're activating your facial nerves, which are attached to your cranial nerves, which are attached to your vagus nerve, which is the biggest nerve in your body. It goes from the back of your brain all the way down to the bottom of your abdomen. And it regulates all of your internal organs, your digestion, your heart rate, your all the functions, all the endocrine glands, everything that controls how your body is functioning and how you feel. So if you smile, not only does it change your mood, it changes the mood of everybody around you. Because think about it, if you walk into a room and you're pissed off, people are going to look at you and go, "Oh my God, this guy is toxic." But
Yeah.
if you come in with a smile on your face and you're positive and you're happy, people are attracted to that. And that's one of the ways, people want to know how to become wealthy. It's how do you attract people and how do you form relationships? Because it's, people in the personal growth industry will tell you it's not what you know, it's who you know. And the more relationships that you can form and be friendly with and have fun with, the more successful you're going to be. So it's all about turning, activating your vagus nerve, which turns on your parasympathetic guru, and you can have more fun. And everybody knows it's a lot more fun to be around somebody that's having fun than somebody that complains all the time and somebody that's, stressed out and is anxious. We are all very sentient beings. We can pick up on subliminal levels whether or not somebody is a friend or a foe. And by that I mean if somebody's in a very negative state, they're sending out they're sending out vibrations that we pick up on subliminally. That's kind of our sixth sense that can tell whether or not somebody is safe to be around or whether it's somebody that, uh-oh, we got to be careful around this guy because he's a loose nut. And so when you're around people that are really stressed out all the time, guess what? You're going to get stressed out too, because you're picking up on all of that and you're internalizing all of it. And so before you know it, you're having a terrible day. And so, and you
It-
can't figure out what happened. I was so happy this morning and now I'm all stressed out. Well, it's probably because you've been around people that are really negative and they are having a bad day. And if it's a day after day after day stuff, then you're going to start having symptoms of um, chronic stress. And chronic stress is really a horrible thing to suffer through, because you're going to have more disease. You're going to have a lot of symptoms that aren't very pleasant, and you're not going to have a very good time. You're not going
Yeah.
to, your life is going to get very, very negative, and then you'll start sending all that out to other people as well.
Yeah,
And so
I'll say to you, the chronic stress really hits a bell because at 40, I was diagnosed with cancer and no history of cancer in my family, and it was, my belief that it was a chronic stress of, basically 18 years of keeping the treadmill at 20, and
well,
trying
that's
to
that
keep up.
you're exactly right, because stress is one of the most, where I'm coming from is common sense and holistic medicine. I'm not a doctor. My twin brother's a doctor, so I can claim that.
Sure,
But the
you're
fact of
doctor
the matter is,
adjacent.
yeah, yeah, a one off. But the fact of the matter is that stress causes all sorts of disease, and they're starting to find out alternative methods to deal with stress, things like hydrogen therapy, cold therapy, all kinds of things that modern medicine just hasn't caught up to yet. What's really fascinating to me is that doctors, medical doctors, allopathic doctors, have fought metaphysics for centuries. That's the healing arts, energy healing, all of that stuff. They've always said that this is just a bunch of voodoo, that is nothing to it. But what they're starting to find out is that the placebo effect is actually very real.
Mhm.
And the ability to believe in the fact that can be healed is very, very powerful. So it doesn't really matter whether somebody's actually projecting energy into somebody. If they believe that they can be healed, then that's basically the trigger that cuts their parasympathetic and their immune systems on, so that they can heal. And it's amazing how powerful the mind is as far as being able to heal itself and to heal its body, heal the body. And so I've spent most of the last 20 years of my life learning how to do that. Um, and uh, as a result, some of this has led me to be, the reason I'm a Sir James Gray is because I was knighted in the Royal Order of Constantine and St. Helen last year for my philanthropic work and for my entrepreneurial work, helping people learn how to turn stress into success.
So
And
what's
so,
interesting, I just kind of want to go back a little bit on the, why do we choose the stress over the alternative? Because what I found is that one, most of us walk through our lives without much awareness in general, and we just absorb that whatever energy, whatever feeling, whatever voices in the room, whatever influences kind of around us. And then number two, it's just as easy to be positive as it is to be negative. It doesn't take any more energy. In fact, I find it takes less energy to be positive than when I was operating in a chronic stress mode. When you're working with people, how do you find that? Like, that's one of those things where for me, I always turned off. I just stopped listening to the news. For me, the news became like persona non grata. I never turned it on ever again. And look at the smile on my face, James.
oh,
Right?
well, I did 2 weeks ago, I'd had enough, and I just quit looking at websites. I quit um, any kind of, shut off all my emails. I just quit looking at the news. And I can tell you that has lifted about 2,000 pounds of weight off of my back, because it's just kind of like I don't have to stress out about what's happening to other people.
And what's interesting is that that's that kind of concept, right? Is that we are living a bubble of fabricated stress, right? Like it's all fabricated. That was the one thought that saved me, is that everything's made up. Like we've made up all of this stuff, like from the suits that we're wearing to the houses that we live in to the science that we talk about. I'm an engineer by trade, so science, I love science, but it's still made up. Like we made it up, right?
Sure.
We invented everything with our brains. So why is it so easy for us to fall back into these stress bombs when, once you see the light, you're like, it does nothing, none of it really matters.
Well, that's the brain's fault. We have one of the things about the brain that's both a blessing and a curse is called neuroplasticity. And what that means is that if you think a thought over and over and over again, it's going to get ingrained into your consciousness. And you will continue to go back to that thought over and over and over again. So things, it's like habits. Basically, it's habitual thinking. And they found that, neural pathways in our brain do form when you are thinking negatively all of the time. It will set up virtual signaling between the synapses, and you will start to form these uh, preferential thought patterns um, on a day-to-day basis. And so, in order to change from negative to positive, then you have to replace the negative thinking with positive thinking, and that takes focus. Because if you're just sitting there doing your job and not really thinking about anything, your brain's going to go back to what it knows. And what it knows is that those negative thoughts. I'm a victim. Life isn't fair. Work is hard. All of those things that we've been taught from an early age, we've got to sacrifice in order to become successful. All of those things, are things that neurolinguistic programmers work with. But the fact is on a biological level, we have to change our habits. We have to change the way we think. And so instead of, we have to find positive thoughts to think on a regular basis during the day. And, basically a lot of people are just lazy. They don't want to focus on something positive. There is, actually there is a pain reward uh, cycle that goes on with negative thinking, because when you're triggering adrenaline and cortisol, that's a rush. And people can actually start being addicted to that. What they found is that people who are constantly thinking and their um, sympathetic nervous system is always engaged, is that the brain becomes conditioned to that. And that's what feels normal. And so, as counterintuitive as this sounds, to feel miserable is what the brain prefers because that's what it knows. And so, and when you don't feel miserable, your brain will say something's wrong here because I'm not firing those synapses that are usually turning on and firing all the time, and something's wrong. And so it will fight to go back to that. It will engineer, it will manufacture um, stressful situations in order to give it a reason to start firing those synapses. And so it's almost like a substance abuse, that you have to actually stop thinking the negative thoughts and you have to focus on it. And until you learn these physical things that I use to teach people, it's very, very difficult to change the way you think on a habitual basis, because you have to do it repeatedly all day long for, whatever habit guru you subscribe to. It's either 21 days or 30 days in order to change reprogram the brain to make new neural synapses and for your neuroplasticity to change. The good news is that yes, it will change, but it takes effort, it takes focus, and it takes discipline. And that a lot of people just aren't trained to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's the devil they know, and it's the comfort zone that they're in.
sure,
And
and
what's
it
interesting about that concept too is that you see those people who always, you know, all the bad things happen to them, quote unquote. And it's almost they can propagate that that mindset because their thoughts create their actions and their actions suck. and therefore their results suck.
Well, our brain is hardwired to do one of two things, and this is all part of the dopamine cycle. It's either designed to chase after pleasure or avoid pain. And so both of those engage the dopamine, and dopamine is a very, very addictive hormone that flies around our brain. It makes us feel euphoric. It makes us feel happy. But the thing is that we get really confused sometimes as to which one we're doing, whether we're avoiding pain or chasing pleasure. And both can look pretty similar. So you have to be aware of your thoughts, and that's another thing that we don't really train our children to do. Because unless I think it was I can't remember who said it, but it's an unexamined life is not worth living.
Mhm,
May have been Einstein or somebody said, but it's all about self awareness
mhm,
and being aware of what you're thinking about. Because most people kind of go around in sleepwalking mode
mhm,
and they're not really paying attention to what they're thinking. Uh, Especially those little voices in our mind that talk to us all the time, which are the self critic, the inner child, and other voices that come up in our head. And most people can't differentiate between the trauma driven thoughts, which were formed when we had something bad happen to us in childhood, or the conscious thoughts that we have because we're focused on something. And so all of those voices that are negative in our mind, those are usually trauma related. They're opinions and beliefs that we form because we did something bad, quote unquote bad, as we were a child and we got punished for it and it scared the crap out of us. And so all of these beliefs started forming in our mind. I'm never going to do that again. Well,
mhm.
guess what happens? We keep doing it over and over and over because that's something that was implanted into our subconscious mind. Another thing about the crack the rich code is that we have to master our subconscious mind, and that's a whole nother show. But the thing, the point is that we do have a subconscious mind that is like, we're taught that our mind is like an iceberg, and that the conscious mind is the top 10%, the subconscious mind that is alive and well and thinking all the time, processing all the time, does not rise to the level of our conscious thought. And so what we have to do is we have to learn how to control that and to look at what our beliefs are, look at what our biases are. One of the amazing things is there's a site online that you can go to determine whether or not you have cognitive biases or not. Everybody have cognitive biases. They may, some open-minded, forward-thinking, progressive person would say, no, I don't have any biases. Well, if you go and take the test on this website, you will be shocked to find out how many biases you have
Yeah.
because, and we don't even realize it. And that's,
What's interesting though, and this is what I wanted to lead you into, like the chapter that you wrote, because this does lead to that whole marketing side of things. Like people market to those biases that we have, regardless of where you think you are in your awareness scale, is that those inherent biases, whether it's Coke versus Pepsi, right? Today, tomorrow, it's another choice, this versus that. So I want to kind of lead you down that path a bit and say, how did you, come up with this marketing chapter when you really your work revolves around, the mind and the brain?
it's all about psychology. If anybody's an entrepreneur, they will understand all of the psychology that goes into selling, sales funnels, um, urgency, discounting, all of those things, which is really common these days. If you look at anybody that's marketing on the internet, most of what you're going to see is mass marketing. And so what you get is people who are selling, let's say, my program. And they say this program is worth $10,000, but if you sign up for it today, it's only $29.95. So what is the subliminal message that you're sending to people when you have a $10,000 product, but you're only charging $30 for it? There are a couple of things that you're telling people. Number one is you're a liar because your program isn't worth $10,000. It's only worth $30. And I know I'll probably get some pushback from people on this, but the fact is that that's the common sense reality, is that if you're selling something for a huge discount, people are going to form the opinion subconsciously that this stuff isn't worth very much.
Mhm.
Now, they may like it and they may sign up for your next program, which is $65, or maybe $25,000, or whatever program you have coming behind it. It's all about a hook, and people want to get people involved in their sales funnel, which is their products. Okay, you'll buy this one at a discount. You may like it and buy the next one at a higher price, and then a higher price and a higher price. People have become very wealthy doing that because they have a lot of people in their data banks. They market to people who don't mind trying something for a lower cost and then see if they like it. There's not much to risk when you're buying something, but the thing I've noticed is that it's very, very difficult. It's like multi-level marketing. If anybody knows what multi-level marketing is, it's very hard work. And selling products at discount is very hard work. You've got to sell a lot of them.
Mhm.
And so the reality of it is would you rather sell to 100 people or sell to 5,000 people? And if you're doing it one-on-one, that's a lot of stress. That's a lot of um, work, hours, labor. It's labor intensive. Now, about, I don't know, 75 years ago, a few retail marketers discovered that if you price your product at a fair price that reflects the value of the product, then people will buy it. And I'm talking about luxury items. We're talking about cars like Porsches, Lamborghinis. Um, you're not going to be able to buy one of those at for $25,000. The
There's no
new
haggling at the
There's no
dealership for a
haggling. Yeah,
Lamborghini, right?
things like Gucci clothes, Gucci handbags, Mont Blanc pens, Cadillacs. All of these are what are considered to be luxury products, and they don't haggle. Their price is their price, and if you want it, you got to pay it. And so it's a completely different marketing approach. But the difference between people who are just starting out in the business who are afraid to charge what they think their product is worth, um, because they don't believe that people will agree with them. And they're afraid that nobody will buy their product unless they price it very, very cheaply. And there's some wisdom to that for people who are just starting out, because I noticed that there are a lot of people who are offering their products for $10 or free. A lot of entrepreneurs who are in this personal growth area are, you know, discounting their products to zero just to get people to try them. And that is one way to do it, but it's very, very difficult unless you have a product that is extremely successful. You're going to be working a long time before you see any money. And the problem is that the personal growth field, just like real estate and insurance, there are tons and tons, there are hundreds of thousands of people doing it. It's super saturated. And so you have to figure out a way to make your product unique. And what I explained in my chapter on luxury marketing is, and again, it's kind of mind blowing to approach it this way, but it approaches it from a realistic standpoint. And the fastest way to set yourself apart is actually to go against the herd mentality and to charge for what you think it's worth. Now, if you don't think your product is worth anything, then you're not going to get very far. But if you really genuinely, honestly believe that your product is unique and it's valuable, then my suggestion is to charge accordingly. Because, and don't worry about the fact you don't have 5,000 clients. If you're charging $1,000 for your product and it's worth $1,000, it's just a matter of time before people start to buy it. And I can tell you from starting out in a discount mode 20 years ago, you have to talk to an awful lot of people who are probably don't have the mindset you want, who get the product for free. I used to do energy healing internationally. I would go around the world having healing clinics, and I can tell you that it took a lot of effort to charge $25 for a healing. When I started charging $500 for a healing, uh, people were a lot more focused and a lot more encouraged and a lot more confident that the healing would work. And because they had a lot more invested in it. And so if you're selling a service product or if you're selling a retail product, you really need to consider luxury marketing because that will set you apart and it will also make you a lot more money because selling 100 widgets at $1,000 each is going to make you a lot more money than selling 10,000 widgets at $10.
So have
Because
you, a quick question for you though, have you found, and this is something that I've seen, especially with what you talked about earlier in how we make our choices and where our brains go, more people will overspend to buy something that makes them feel good versus something that removes a pain obstacle for them?
that is a excellent question. I would say that more people would pay more to avoid pain because that's more immediate in their, and it has to do with the way the brain is structured because it will pay attention more attention to the pain than it will to the pleasure. Um,
So if
it,
we use an example like a high ticket Ferrari, like what is, because I always look at, the luxury side of things, like luxury hotels, luxury purses, for women, luxury makeup, luxury perfumes. That is, I always saw that was it's going to make me feel better than how I feel now.
okay, well, here we get back into neurobiology and the
Yeah.
dopamine cycle. Okay, everybody knows about the honeymoon period, whether it's a relationship or a product or a raise or a promotion, is that the satisfaction that you get and the pleasure you get from that is temporary.
Mhm.
And that's because the dopamine hit you get from acquiring that product or that position or that raise is short lived. And so we look for the next thing. Buddha said it best. He said, desire is the source of all suffering. And he understood that when we acquire an object of our desire, that our brain will go to the next desire. And a lot of times we set a goal. That's one problem with the whole manifestation industry. And I'm actually coming out with a training seminar to help people understand what works in manifesting and what doesn't work. Is that when you put a goal that you want to achieve, whether it's a car or a house or a relationship, when you get it, your brain is hardwired to not be satisfied with that for very long, unless you use other parts of your brain to continue the effect.
Hmm.
And so it involves taking different parts of your brain and activating different parts of your brain functions in order to maintain that satisfaction and fulfillment. Because everybody who's gotten a raise feels good for a few days, few weeks. Then what? They want another one.
Yeah.
And the same thing with a car. You get that Lamborghini. What do you want? You want two of them, or
Yeah.
you want a Maserati. It's just the brain, the way the brain works. And it's all about hooked into the survival mechanism because if you had one uh, one of something, you're going to want another because that will ensure a better chance of survival.
Hmm.
And once people understand this, then they can understand that it's not so much about acquiring, it's the journey. That's why a lot of people will tell you that it's not about the success in acquiring something, it's about the journey of changing, of growing, of and changing the way you're thinking and enjoying the journey because the acquisition just will flow if you learn how to take the journey. And so the manifestation is not about acquiring, it's about the living. So all of that has to say is, let me get back to your question about the pleasure part. When you remove pain, that's a permanent condition. You don't have that pain anymore. But when you acquire something and you have pleasure, that's short-lived. So when I say that it's probably better to avoid the pain than it is to acquire the pleasure, it's because that's the way you now if you understand all of this and you train your brain how to be fulfilled and satisfied with whatever you have, then it really doesn't matter whether you've acquired a Lamborghini or a Dodge. It's just you are happy where you are. Now, I can tell you that motivated people who are intelligent and have stumbled upon the success of manifesting can have anything they want. But they understand that it's not having that produces the pleasure. It's the manifestation that produces the pleasure.
Hmm.
And so the more you manifest, the more you're going to be able to enjoy that dopamine effect. So I drive a Bentley, and I can tell you I've had that car for a year, and I still am thrilled every time I start that thing up because it is a pure joy to be driving around in a Bentley. But the thing is that if I had my heart set on a Porsche, that Bentley would not mean nothing to me.
Yeah. And I think you actually said it there. Every day I start it up and I enjoy it. You remind yourself of that, enjoyment every day, which helps to sustain the pleasure you get from it.
It's using a different part of my brain though, because you have to understand that it's a different thinking process that allows me to continue to enjoy it than it's when I first bought the thrill that when I first bought it. I don't have that thrill anymore. I've replaced it with the satisfaction of owning that car.
I have a
So
similar one from moving from Canada. I live in Canada for 40 years and I moved to California with my family. And every day I walk outside with a big smile on my face because it's not cold. And that is what I resonate with. It's like, oh, it's just nice. It's always nice here.
well, I used to live in Tobermory, if you know where that is. I know what cold is. That's at the top of the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, and it gets pretty dang cold up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But,
So
but yeah,
I'm gonna pivot gears here a little bit. I want to ask you a couple of questions revolving around like what brought you in to becoming a collaborator and joining our mastermind at the Rich Code.
well, actually, Jim Lutz got me involved. I went to one of his penthouse summits. I was invited to go, and it was, he's a master at what he does. And where I met Jim Britt, and they were talking about uh, how to become known, how to establish your brand. And for people who are just getting involved and just starting to be an entrepreneur, or just starting their careers, one of there are two ways that are highly leveraged in order to establish your brand. One of them is writing books. And one of the easiest ways to write a book is to do a compilation book because you only have to write a chapter. And then, you get your picture on the front with, as in Cracking the Rich Code, you get your picture on the front with Tony Robbins. So you can use books. There's a whole another uh, field of using books in marketing, but it reaches more people than just one-on-one marketing or advertising or SEO and all that kind of stuff. Internet marketing. So you can start. I would highly recommend anybody who's trying to establish a brand is to find a compilation book series that fits your brand, and then start writing, engage in that, and because that way you can understand and have a product, have a book that you can use to market your product. After that, I would go for writing a book about what it is that you do. How did you get there? What did you have to overcome? How do you inspire people? What is it that you do that people want to engage in? That book will be your best um, marketing tool. Now, I went further from this because I started making movies.
Hmm.
Movies is probably the highest leverage way you can market your brand because I do documentaries. Now I'm on to feature length films, but documentaries are one of the best ways to market your brand. If you have something that have that's unique, or you have something that is you've overcome, you can find you know if you want to put my contact information in here, I'll be glad to talk to anybody that would be interested in doing a documentary about their life or about their product or whatever it is, because you can reach 100 times more people or 1,000 times more people with being in a successful documentary than you can with a book. And you can reach 1,000 times more people through a book than you can by internet marketing, social media. And
Yeah.
so what you're trying to do is leverage your money and your talents so that you reach as many people as possible. And if you can get into an award-winning documentary, and most of these documentaries have 10 to 12 to 15 people in them. And if you can hitch your wagon to that star, then you're really going to take off. Because once people see that documentary, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of people before a successful documentary, that basically all you paid is the fee to be in the movie. And that's much better than hard copy media publication. I get a lot of articles written about me simply because I've been so successful. But I started with these compilation books.
Hmm.
That was, one thing led to another, but the first thing I did was to be in The Choice. I was in volume 20 of The Choice with Jim Britt, and he was the one that helped me start leveraging my time and my efforts into something that's more um, productive. And I did write a very long chapter in The Choice about the guru and the warrior, and that's been very successful. So anybody who's looking for and by leverage, I mean by uh, using $1,000 to get $100,000 worth of effect, as opposed to one-on-one talking, trying to sell. I'll tell you, one of the most exhausting things I've ever done is try to sell one-on-one, because it's like that's a lot of work.
Mhm.
And I really enjoy doing it, quite ironically, because I get to know people and I get to understand what's going on in other people's lives. And that's a real thrill for me because, being a lawyer for 30 years, I was in it for the service work. I was in it to help people. Unfortunately, I had a few things going against me emotionally and mentally that caused me to burn out. But if I knew then what I know now, I'd be representing presidential
Isn't that
candidates
the
like,
line of the century though, James?
yeah,
If I knew then what I knew now, right?
yeah. I mean,
Everything
of
would be
course,
different.
of course, everything would be different. I would have bought Apple when it was $5,
Exactly.
but or I would have bought the Bitcoins when they were, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't really, that's kind of like a joke, an inside joke, because the thing is the only thing you really need to invest in is yourself. And if anybody wants to really be successful and crack the rich code, really invest in your self health, self care. Be as healthy as you possibly can be. Do what it takes to um, be happy, and read these compilation books, because it will explain to you what it takes for highly successful people to enjoy their life. The thing is that the biggest lie that we're told in our culture is if you make a lot of money, you'll be happy. Nope. Because what you're going to happen is you're just going to want more money, and you will work harder to make more money than you did to start making money. And so what happens is you alienate yourself from the relationships that you care about. I've been married 3 times. Finally, I learned how to be married, and I'm in a very happy marriage right now. But I lost 2 marriages because I was working all the time. And because that's what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And so little did I know the damage that I caused because I was working 16 hours a day. But self-care, get out in nature, be healthy, smile, and learn how to be of service to people. And you will be a wealthy, wealthy person.
Thank you for that, James. And for anyone listening, if you are interested in joining the Crack Code or being an author, collaborator, and being part of our network, we have over 300 authors. We are trying to fill up volume 15 currently. So we are at volume 15. James is in volume 13. I'm in volume 10. We've got lots of connections, authors, other mindset leaders, a place that you can come and grow your brand, grow your business, and do it with a support, surrounding yourself with people who have that like-minded approach, right? Who want to see everyone succeed. So if you're interested in writing for and joining this collaboration, you can email me at pete@vescasconsulting.com, or you can reach out to us on LinkedIn, reach out directly to Jim Britt. You can find us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. So we're going to be wrapping it up here, James. Is there one last thing that we kind of missed that you want to bring up?
Well, I think that going back to luxury marketing, you have to believe in yourself, because the power of belief is incredible. And if you believe in yourself, if you believe in your product, you will be successful.
Thank you. That is great tips. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. And I look forward to seeing you in the masterminds.
I love it. Thank you very much, Pete.
All right. See y'all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.